put together some thoughts for you. Hopefully this will be educational, uplifting, inspiring, motivational, all those things. Between the Bible study this morning and some of the songs, I can't help but think about us drawing nigh to God, getting closer to God. And when we think about God, think about the beginning of the Bible when it says, the Spirit of the Lord hovered over the face of the deep. The earth was void and without form. Of course, through his spoken word, he calls into existence everything we know. Of course, if you dig under the topsoil, almost anywhere in the world, you come to rock. We try to think about what God is and how to perceive him. The Bible says, heaven is his throne and the earth is his footstool. Think about that in literal terms, how big that would make God. One of the things I used to try to imagine, and it still is beyond our capability, but imagine the entire universe that we can see. That universe exists on the head of a pin, in a pin cushion, off in a room that God is in. God is so much greater than we can even imagine, that even our thought process of trying to comprehend that is beyond us. 500 years before the birth of Christ, I should get out I brought props. I told Doug this morning I brought lunch. That was not true unless we had the ability to turn these into, I'll get to the 5 stones, but you might have guessed how many there are. I'll get to that part in a little bit. Look, the bag has a hole in it. It didn't fall out. All right. 500 years before the birth of Christ, Chinese philosopher Confucius said, one who would remove a mountain begins by taking away small stones. Many things in this life seem impossible. They seem improbable. They seem unlikely. They seem like they're insurmountable obstacles. Well, the Bible tells us that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. It tells us to ask, and we'll be answered. To seek, we will find. To knock, it'll be open. We have to be proactive because God is already here. The Bible tells us where 2 or more are gathered in his midst, in his name, there he will be in their midst. Jesus took it one step further and said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. He is with each of us. Every step of every day, every breath we take. But what is the significance of stones in the Bible? Some of the things that are mentioned, of course, we don't have time to go through everything that relates to them, but they are used as parts of altars. They are adornments on the priest's vest. They're used as descriptive adjectives, as a pillow, as valued gems, as projectiles, as building materials, as cornerstones, as knives, as vessels for cooking and storage. Tablets, property boundaries, mentioned in the temptation of Christ. They're used as doors to seal tombs and wells, ossuaries and grave markers, adornment and foundation of the New Jerusalem, a gift from God with a new name written on it. In Genesis 2 and 12, it is talked about a gemstone. And the gold of that land is good, and there is beryllium there, and the onyx stone. The onyx stone, you might be aware, is black, we might think of as a piece of coal. Highly polished, they were prized throughout the ancient world. In Genesis 11 and 13, and they said to one another, go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and slime they had for mortar. Man is always thinking of ways to use the materials that God has given us. And we as Christians have to use the materials God has given us to enlighten the rest of the world. God creates light. God says, let there be light. And there was. We are the children of light. We are adopted brothers and sisters, sons and daughters of the Most High. When we think about this God who created existence, through his spoken word that he loves us and he created us for a purpose. And each of us have a purpose in life. Each of us have some mission that we are to fulfill. We do not earn our way into heaven. We are given forgiveness by his blood. In Genesis 28:11, and he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took the stones of that place and put them for his pillows and lay down in that place to sleep. And you imagine having to sleep on a pillow of stone. It doesn't sound very comfortable, but yet this life is all filled with troubles. There's a lot of joy in it as well. But the Bible tells us that the toils of this road that we're on will seem nothing when we get to the end of the way. That we are to overcome. We are to study to show ourselves approved, as Larry mentioned this morning. That we are continually studying. It doesn't tell them anywhere in there that we're supposed to stop studying. This is a lifelong learning process. And this is a process of learning to love one another and love those who hate us, love those who persecute us, to pray for them. Satan is alive and well. He rules this world, and he does so by attacking the weakest among us. In Genesis 29:10, here it talks about being used as the cap of a well. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Of course, these stones that covered the wells kept contaminants from getting in there. And they were obviously quite large to where this woman was not able to actually move the stone herself. In Exodus 4:25, then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet and said, surely a bloody husband art thou to me. Here a stone, probably we think of as a piece of slate or something like that, is razor sharp and can cut you. The Bible talks about God's sword, his two-edged sword that is like that. It rightly divides the word of truth. We are to be followers of truth, lovers of truth, to seek wisdom. And even though our wisdom pales in comparison, when we have doubts on our journey, we're supposed to seek God, to ask him, to seek and to knock. We're told to pray without ceasing, that every moment of our lives is supposed to be an offering to God. And we all fall short. We're all sinners. In Exodus 20:25, and if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. For if thou lift up thy tool upon it, you have polluted it. When they were building altars in the ancient world, to use mortar or to use a chisel and a hammer and cut the stone was to invalidate your offering. We are like that in a way. We are to leave our vessel intact. The Bible tells us different times, hey, if your eye offend you, pluck it out. It's not telling literally, it says, you know that something is your weakness. Those are the things that you have to work on the most. When you point out your own weakness to yourself, the first issue and first way to go about solving any problem is to realize that you have a problem. And that comes with being honest with yourself. In Exodus 24:12, and the Lord said unto Moses, come up to me into the mount and be there, and I will give thee tablets of stone and a law and commandment which I have written, that thou mayest teach them. Well, we're under the new covenant, but the old covenant starts with the first commandment, which we're still subject to today. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. There is one God, and he loves us all. He loves all of creation. But all of you together, look around. Someday, all of us will stand before the throne of God and receive our reward. We will know as we are known. There he will separate those who are of his flock from those who are not of his flock, and they will perish. They will be separated eternally. The Bible tells us that. It says, narrow is the way. In Exodus 25:7, rocks are mentioned as ornaments in the priest's ephods, his breastplates. Onyx stones and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. In 1 Samuel 17:40, and he took the staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stone out of the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in the script. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. Now I'm going to pause on this portion of it a little bit, because this morning's reading talked about, just mentioned briefly in the first 5 verses, the rock of Israel. David's not the first king of Israel, he's the second king of Israel. He's speaking to them, he's having them write this down in his old age as he's giving his deathbed confession. David made a lot of mistakes, but it's through his bloodline that Christ comes into being in this physical world. He takes the physical form. David, shortly before this, when he's going to fight Goliath, he's a shepherd. Shepherds in ancient Israel are the lowest of the low. They are unfit for any other job. He is the youngest, or next to the youngest of his brethren. And his older brothers, when he's out there to take them food and things on the battle line, the battlefront, they ridicule him. Of course, David sees this insurmountable foe that the entire nation of Israel is afraid of. He's out there day after day after day taunting them, just like Satan does to us, just like Satan does to the believers all throughout this world. It's constant. It's unrelenting. They ridicule you. They make fun of you. They tempt you. They will do anything they can to try to break your faith. Well, David, as I just read here in 17:40, he gathers 5 smooth stones from the brook. Now, about a month ago, I went and pulled these out. Well, we call it a crick, but I think crick and brook are probably pretty close together as far as several thousand years ahead between us. Now, if you were going to fight Goliath and you were going to use a sling, of course, David has a staff in his hand too. But if you're not familiar with the ancient slings, it's not the slingshot you think of now with the Y and the rubber band between it. It is 2 pieces of leather with a leather patch at the end. And then they would place the rock in there and they would swing it round and round and round. Now, modern day, to give you some idea how fast this is coming off there, modern day baseball pitchers can throw around 100 miles an hour, some a little faster, some a little slower, and then depending on what kind of pitch they're throwing. It's estimated from the studies that have been done, these projectiles are flying at about 75 miles an hour. So if you can imagine, I like to use this. If you're going to fight Goliath, and it says in 17:4, it says Goliath was a span and a half. So using 18 inches for that, Goliath is about 9.5 feet tall. Now I'm a little under 6 foot. Imagine someone bigger than me, and if you just take my weight and extrapolate it up to that, and think about him being a relatively young man, probably, and strapping, he probably weighs 400 pounds, 450 pounds. And would you take a little rock to fight Goliath, or would you take a bigger rock? Well, I'd probably take a big rock. Well, that's the kind of weapons we need when we're fighting Satan. You ask God, and he will give you what you need to defeat the fiery arrows of the wicked one. It tells us that right in the Bible. That he is prowling around like a lion, seeking whom to devour. He wants to destroy you personally, and he wants to destroy your message. Because if you can't defeat the message, you defeat the messenger. One of the first rules of warfare. Well, David takes this shepherd's bag, pulls out his stone. He is ridiculed. Goliath, right up to the moment David hurls the stone, Goliath is ridiculing him. He's going to feed his body, what's left of it, to the fowls of the air. Of course, we all know how the story turns out. He hits him so hard in the middle of the forehead that the stone sinks in. Goliath's not dead, but he uses his own sword then to execute him. David becomes a hero and eventually then ends up being king. Now, as he's looking back through time here in the 23rd chapter of 2 Samuel, this second part of the verses that were 8 through 17 talk about his men of valor. These are his friends. Now, we know he was good friends with Saul's son, Jonathan, but he also had these men of valor. And we think about them probably as we might think in the Green Beret or the Rangers or the SEAL teams. These guys are tough, and they are loyal, and they are honest, and they have integrity and values, and they stand by David's side. They have his back no matter what. Now, he's in a cave of Adullam near the harvest time. A couple of verses later here, down in the 15th verse, and David longed and said, "Oh, that one would give me a drink of the water of the well of Bethlehem." You notice I threw that in there. And David longed and said, "Oh, that one would give me a drink of the water of the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate." And the three mighty men brake through the heart of the Philistines and drew water out of the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. Nevertheless, he would not drink thereof, but poured it out as an offering unto the Lord. They risked their lives, fought through the Philistines' lines, and brought David a drink of the water. And that's real friendship. That's loyalty. That's devotion. You know, David, he was a young man getting ready to fight Goliath. You think he knew the outcome? You think he was afraid when he went to the brook and picked out the 5 stones? I would be. But he tells them, the army that's there for Israel, how can you let this Philistine defy the armies of the living God? And you think about Elijah when he had his servant, and the Sumerians came in, and they were surrounding the mountain, and he told to Gehazi, his servant, he says, his servant woke him up. He says, "Oh, we're surrounded." He says, "Oh, you know, no." And he prays to the Lord to open his eyes and sees all these flaming chariots of fire. Well, these are the unseen hosts that are doing battle with us. They are supporting us. They are protecting us. They are defending us. There is no power on this earth that can end your life till you have fulfilled the purpose God has created for you. In 1 Samuel 25, it says, "But it came to pass in the morning when the wine was gone out of Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, and his heart died within him and became as a stone." Of course, we know how that goes, but he ends up passing away. But she sent out food for David's troops. What did David tell her when he came? He had already decided that everyone there was going to die if it had not been for her actions. When Zechariah 12:3, there's a metaphor, it's used as a metaphor, and "At that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. So all the people of the earth be gathered together against it." For thousands of years, Jerusalem's been in the news, and today is no different than it was then. But God will forever protect his people Israel. The Bible tells us in the place where I said you are not my people, he says, "There I will call you my people, my sons and my daughters." In Matthew 3 and 9, it talks about building materials. And think not to say within yourselves, we have Abraham for our father. For I say unto you that God is able of these stones to raise up children unto Abraham. So imagine God has the power to turn stones into children, if he so desired. In Matthew 4 and 3, it talks about the conversion of physical properties, that God is not limited in anything. And when the tempter came to him, he said, if thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. If you're hungry, you've been fasting in the wilderness for 40 days with nothing to eat and only water to drink, just command that these stones become bread and eat. And what does Jesus say? Same thing the Bible tells us today. You shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. And right here's the book with God's word in it for all mankind to read. And that's our job, is to share the knowledge of the love of God that's in this book. Because the Bible is a love story talking about how much God cares for his creation. That he would send his own son to die so that we might inherit eternity. Matthew 4 and 6, and saith unto him, if thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, he shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou shalt dash thy foot against a stone. Wasn't it interesting that 2 out of the 3 times that Satan is tempting Christ, he's mentioning stones? And I didn't realize, I guess, until I started doing the research, how many times throughout the Bible it talks about the rock that is higher than I, the rock of ages. In Matthew 21 and 42, it is mentioned as a cornerstone, both physical and spiritual. Jesus said unto them, did you never read the scriptures? The stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Well, God doesn't do anything without a purpose. God doesn't plan anything that is not accomplished. God has a mission. We look at the leaders, not just of our country, but of countries all around the world and say, why do these people who are seemingly evil are in there? Well, they're doing God's will. Whatever God's will is, it's a bigger picture that we can comprehend. And all we can do is keep doing what God demands of us, is to love one another and to spread the knowledge of his love that he has for us with everyone that we contend. Because the end is coming someday. It might not be in our lifetimes. It might not be for another 10,000 years, another 100,000 years. The end is coming someday, and Christ will return. The Bible tells us if the days that before his return had not been shortened, no flesh would survive. Nothing would remain. Matthew 24 and 2, stones are mentioned in prophecy. And Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another. It shall not be thrown down. Of course, in 70 AD, the Romans come in and sack Jerusalem and destroy the temple. Not one stone remained of the temple, one upon another. Now you can still see the western wall to this day. That's the surrounding parapet, the surrounding area there that built up the area where the temple actually resided at that time. In Matthew 27 and 60, it said, and laid it in his own tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock, and he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre, and he departed. Here, Jesus is buried with the rich, even though he's an outcast, even though he's been publicly exonerated and then sentenced to death. He is buried with the rich. He is buried in a brand new tomb that's never been used, and it is sealed. Matthew 27 and 66, and says, so they went and made the sepulchre secure, sealing the stone and setting a watch. Why did they set the watch? Because we don't want the disciples to come and steal the body and say, he's been risen from the dead. Because he's been telling people this was his destiny in life, was to show that we have no fear of this physical body dying, that this physical body is not going to inherit eternity. It's not going to inherit the kingdom. The Bible tells us that. We have to worship him in spirit and in truth. It says flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom. This inner man that Larry so eloquently talked about this morning during class, this inner man is renewed day by day. It's going to live forever. So do you want to live in a comfort of God's love and in his presence, or do you want to be separated eternally from God? Well, anybody who believes as we do wants to live eternally with God. For those who deny that God exists or deny his love or deny his son, they do so at their own peril. Our job is to inform them of what we believe, show them the evidence that has helped us to make up our minds about what we believe and why, and then the decision is on them. I'm reminded of the song that says, "You never mentioned him to me." When you have an opportunity, that is when you take it. Opportunity doesn't just knock once. Opportunity knocks over and over and over again, like some persistent, annoying insurance salesman. Oh yeah, I've been an insurance salesman for 30 years too now. But opportunity is always there. You think about one of the current politicians, it seems like they're always dumping a truckload of lemons, in front of one of his buildings. And every time this metaphoric truckload of lemon comes, he turns it into lemonade. I don't know whether that's right or not, but like half hour later, there's a lemonade stand there. Hey, thank you for the free merchandise. Thank you for this. Well, God expects us to do that. When things aren't going well, turn it inside out and look at it from the outside as an opportunity to overcome an obstacle, because we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Ask for the strength and he will give it to you. He will make a way out. He will help you accomplish his goal. And as long as your goal is congruent with his goal, you will never fail. Even if you give up this earthly body, you will never fail in the mission God has given to you. In Acts 17:29, it says, what God is not. For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone, graven by art and by man's device. Not like us. His ways are higher than ours. Not flesh and blood. He's not weak. He's not imperfect. He doesn't sin. He doesn't cast a shadow. He doesn't lie. He gives you his word and he keeps it. Even if you break your word to him, he keeps his word. Because that's who he is. That's what he is. And he is a God of love. In Ephesians 2:20, it talks about Christ's body being like a building, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. 1 Peter 2:4, to whom, coming as a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God, and precious. We are all precious in his sight, all of mankind. But some will be eternally separated from God. And it's our job is to keep Satan from taking as many of those people as we can, to get them on the right side of God. 1 Peter 2:5, ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house and a holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. In 1 Peter 2:8, it talks about the unbelieving. In this, a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed. Revelations 2:17. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, And in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saving him that receiveth it. How are we doing on time, Doug? Am I running too late? I don't know. I wasn't really watching the clock when I come up here. I'm almost done here. Revelations 4 and 3. Jasper and sardine stones are mentioned. Jasper we think of as the modern day equivalent of quartz. And of course it can be translucent, kind of an opaque white, or it can be brown or reddish color, depending on yellow, depending on the minerals and things surrounding it. And sardine stones are also there, and they are usually a bright red type of rock. And he that sat upon the throne was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne in the sight like unto an emerald. We all know what an emerald looks like. The Bible gives us mental images of what God looks like, that he has a physical form. Genesis tells us we're made in his image. He has a front, he has a back, he has a top, he has a bottom, he has eyes, he has a head, he has hair. This is what the Bible tells us. Doesn't say what he looks like, doesn't say that we're exactly like him. He says, no, we're just made in his image. We're similar. In Revelations 18 and 24, and it says, a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. They're not talking about ancient Babylon, they're talking about the new Babylon in Revelation, about the Babylon that is the center of world commerce. We don't know exactly where that is, but I've always been a kind of a student of history, and it's interesting that if you just go about 3 miles east of Manhattan, the name of the town is Babylon, New York. Of course, who lives there? The titans of industry, because they're the only people who can afford to live there. I don't know if that's the Babylon they're talking about, but time will tell. God's word does not go out and come back without accomplishing whatever it was sent out to accomplish. In Revelations 21:11, it says, having the glory of God, her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone that's clear as crystal. In Revelations 21 and 19, and the foundations of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprasus, the 11th, I missed the 10th, the chrysoprase, the 11th the jacinth, the 12th an amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Every several gate was of one pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, as it were transparent glass. Of course, this is talking about the New Jerusalem. I can't go into the whole thing, but the Bible gives us the measurements basically in furlongs. And if you translate that in approximate terms, since the building is as long as it is wide and as tall as it is, it's a perfect cube. It's about 1,500 miles on either side. So imagine this New Jerusalem goes from here to central Nebraska. And that's how tall it is too. And all these stones, all these precious stones, and these gigantic gates, the gates are just one pearl. This is how fantastic God's ability are. Just unrealizable, the power that he has to do these things and to describe them to us, what he has already done. Well, the Bible tells us that when we accept Christ, we become the friend of God. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. It might seem like you're alone sometimes, but you're not. And when you feel at your lowest, there are your brothers and sisters in Christ all over the world that are there to give a helping hand. And we've seen it time and again, that they never fail to help each other, because that's what people who love each other done, what they do. It says, friendship with the world is enmity with God. You still have to interact and be with the people of this world, but you do not have to be like them. We are to be like a light shining in darkness. We are supposed to be different. They should notice that we're different. And as I mentioned earlier, the Bible talks about Jesus being the rock of ages. And he told Peter when he left him on this earth that thou art Peter, and upon this rock will I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate being here.